You're listening to Power Breakfast with Tessa Dooms.
The time is 6:53 on Power Breakfast this morning with Tessa Dooms, and we keep following the stories that are emerging out of the Starlink universe. Excuse the pun. This morning with us is ICASA Chairperson Mothibi Ramusi, who is going to be just giving us insight into what ICASA's next steps are, given what came out of Parliament this week as Parliament's Communications Portfolio Committee there was probing into the Starlink matter, or at least into the BEE matter, with the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies. And there was a allegation made there that Starlink is already in South Africa. Very, very, very curious. Mothibi, thank you so much for joining us this morning. What piqued your interest as ICASA, and what are your next steps?
Hi, good morning, Tess, and good morning to the listeners. As you know, the authority were responsible, amongst others, to make sure that those that we have licensed comply with their terms of reference with their licenses. Now, in this instance, 2 years ago, 2023, we were made aware that there is a company in this country called ICASA The Push. At the time, you might have noticed the name ICASA. Obviously, we were concerned that somebody is trading with
on your name.
Yes. We took them to the CIPC. I must say that they were given a court order not to use that name anymore. But fast forward, we're informed that they were actually migrating to Mozambique. Unfortunately, that was not the correct statement. So of late, we were then informed by very good South Africans, and I encourage those that sees anything that is not, in terms of the law. So we were informed that in terms of what ICASA The Push, Starlink was found to still be operating in South Africa.
What is the connection there? I'm confused.
Well, when you have multinationals, sometimes what they do, they appoint local companies to distribute their kits. So in this instance, in 2023, this particular group were found to have been distributing Starlink kits in South Africa in the Northern Cape. We confiscated the equipment because, as you know, anyone that is providing a service, telecommunication, broadcasting, or postal in this country without a license, in terms of our ICASA Act, the Electronic Communication Act, definitely if we found you doing those kind of illegal stuff, we are bound to then activate our compliance. So in this instance, with Starlink, because in terms of our law, they don't have a license at the moment. So even if they were to be found to be providing a service in this country, they would have gone through the authority. But that's not the case. And what we are doing right now is just to put some law so that anyone, and to rebuild the confidence of South Africans immediately to say that in terms of what we do, this is purely just applying the law in terms of the Starlink issue.
So when the MK party raised this in Parliament this week, this was not your first rodeo hearing about this. But why is it that you are now doing an investigation? Was it triggered by what happened in Parliament, or were you in the process?
No, Tita, we've always been in the process. Actually, as the chair, I wrote directly to SpaceX, which is the mother company of Starlink, on the 21st of May. That was actually 4 days before we went to Parliament. It's just that I'm happy that even some of the members in Parliament, having noticed, they raised it, but it's a matter that we have already been engaging on. It's unfortunate because, as you know, the meeting in Cape Town, it was for the minister. So if I had an opportunity, I would have announced to South Africans that we've already started the process. Now, the reason why we want to put this thing in record is we want to encourage that those that are still having an interest to come to invest in South Africa, they must know that we do have laws. And, as an investor, you don't want to come into a country where there's no regulatory certainty. So what we are doing as an authority is just to make sure that we put things into perspective, and so that those that have interest know that they should operate within the law.
Mothibi, this is probably a good time for me to ask you some questions about what you know about Starlink at this point, besides investigating whether this operator has been giving their kits out illegally. Many people are in two minds about whether or not Starlink should be allowed to be here, even if it is without the requisite BE, legislation. And many of our listeners were saying, well, as long as it brings jobs. What do we know about the jobs plan behind an outfit like Starlink? Have they made a formal application to the country yet? Do we have a sense of whether or not it would come with jobs?
Well, Starlink as a company, I don't have an application in our office. But what I can confirm is anyone all over the world that is providing a low Earth orbiting satellite services. In this country currently, we are managing anyone that wants to have an interest in our sector through the Electronic Communication Act. And we've got a prescribed process on how licenses are issued. But for this instance, we have, as an authority, not opened the licensing window for what you call the independent ECNS licenses. So as and when that window is opened, we'll definitely be receiving new applications. But in the interim, anyone that has got an interest, there are a number of South African companies that have got licenses. One can actually work through them in partnership because by virtue of them having licenses to date, it means they are still compliant in terms of our ECA. So that's basically where we are right now in terms of the licensing regime. But I can confirm there are definitely good jobs with satellites, not only LEO, by the way, Tessa. We've got geostationary satellites that we have always been working with in this country. I mean, even now, our broadcasting, the Transnet of the world, geostationary has always been satellites that we have licensed. Obviously, they are working through their partners in the country.
And what kind of jobs are we talking about here? What kind of specialities, expertise? What level, entry or not?
Well, as a satellite engineer, I mean, you're bound to have an opportunity in planning. For example, when you put together all the infrastructure on the ground, when you build what you called as when you build all the gateways in the country, and obviously when you do analysis, because in terms of space, it depends even whether you are into communication or spatial planning, because because in the geospatial as well, we've got SANSA, which is one of our sister, regulator. So
we're not talking about construction jobs, for example, because people. I think our imaginations is there's a big infrastructure rollout, just in the last few seconds.
Well, construction is there in terms of putting together systems when you build the satellite itself, because remember, in this country, we do have capabilities of building satellites. We have done it in the past, and it's something that I believe in terms of our government program of having a space program, I see lots of new jobs being created in that field as well.
Very, very interesting stuff. Thank you so much there. The ICASA Chairperson, Mothibi Ramusi, just giving us an update on an investigation they're doing into whether Starlink is already illegally operating in the country. Fascinating stuff. It's 7 o'clock and time for the news.